The gunshot echoed through the canyon walls like thunder, and Sarah Mitchell watched in horror as the mountain man standing between her and the outlaws staggered backward, blood blooming dark across his left shirt sleeve. He did not cry out, did not fall, just steadied himself against the rocky outcropping and fired back with his other hand, his aim true enough to send the remaining bandits scattering into the pines. Sarah pressed herself against the wagon wheel, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. She had left St. Louis 3 months ago with her aunt and uncle, bound for California with dreams of opening a dress shop in Sacramento. Now, her aunt and uncle lay buried 2 days behind her on the trail, victims of cholera. And she had been alone when the outlaws found her that morning. Alone until this stranger had appeared from the mountainside like some avenging angel, all muscle and fury and wild determination. The shooting stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the gunfire had been. "They are gone," the man said, his voice rough as gravel. He holstered his pistol and turned toward her, and Sarah got her first real look at him in the bright October sunlight of 1872. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and thick with muscle that strained against his buckskin shirt. His hair fell past his shoulders in dark waves, and a beard covered the lower half of his face, but his eyes were what caught her attention. They were gray as storm clouds, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then she saw the blood dripping from his fingertips. "You are shot!" she gasped, scrambling to her feet. "Yes, ma'am." He looked down at his arm as if noticing it for the first time. "Appears so. You need a doctor. We need to get you to a town, to someone who can help. Nearest town is 2 days' ride. Bullet needs to come out now." He walked past her to the wagon, moving with a slight limp she had not noticed before. Up close, she could see old scars on his hands and neck, the marks of a man who had lived hard and survived harder. "I do not understand," Sarah said, following him. "What are you going to do?" He pulled a knife from his belt, the blade catching the sun. "Going to cut it out." "Yourself? That is insane. You cannot possibly." "Done it before." He sat down heavily on a fallen log near the wagon, started rolling up his sleeve. The bullet had torn through the meat of his upper arm, the entry wound still bleeding steadily. Sarah felt dizzy just looking at it. "Please," she said, her voice shaking. "Let me help you. There must be something I can do." He glanced up at her, and something in his expression softened. "You know anything about doctoring, miss?" "Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell." She knelt beside him. "And no, I do not. But I can follow instructions. I can be steady." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then, Miss Mitchell. I'm going to need you to pour some whiskey on this wound when I tell you. Then I'm going to need you not to faint." "I have never fainted in my life," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "Good." He pulled a flask from his coat pocket and took a long swallow, then handed it to her. "My name is Jacob Brennan. Most folks just call me Brennan." Sarah took the flask with trembling hands. Jacob Brennan. She repeated the name silently, committing it to memory. The man who had saved her life. Brennan set the knife blade against his arm, and Sarah wanted to look away but forced herself to watch. His hands were steady, surgeon steady, as he worked the tip of the blade into the wound. Sweat broke out across his forehead, soaking into his hairline, but he did not make a sound. Sarah could see the muscles in his jaw working, the cords standing out in his neck, but his hands never wavered. Blood ran freely down his arm now, dripping onto the dirt. Sarah gripped the flask so hard, her knuckles went white. "There," Brennan muttered. The knife blade scraped against something solid, and Sarah's stomach lurched. He adjusted his angle, dug deeper, and then suddenly he was pulling the blade back out with a small, misshapen piece of lead caught on the tip. He flicked it onto the ground and pressed his palm against the wound, breathing hard. "Whiskey," he said. "Now." Sarah uncorked the flask and poured. The whiskey hit the open wound, and Brennan went rigid, every muscle in his massive frame tensing like coiled rope, but he did not pull away. Sarah poured until he told her to stop, then watched as he pulled a relatively clean bandana from his pocket and tied it around his arm, pulling the knot tight with his teeth. "That is it?" she asked, incredulous. "You are done?" "For now." He took the flask back and drank again, then offered it to her. "You look like you could use some." Sarah did not usually drink spirits, but she took the flask and swallowed, coughing as the whiskey burned its way down her throat. It steadied her, though, warming her from the inside out. Thank you, she said, for saving me. Those men, they were going to... She could not finish the sentence. I know. Brennan's voice was gentle. You are safe now. I will not let anything happen to you. Sarah believed him. She could not explain why, but looking into those storm-gray eyes, she believed every word. What were you doing out here? She asked. I thought I was completely alone. I have a cabin about 5 miles north, up in the high country. I was hunting when I heard the shooting. He gestured toward the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. I live up there most of the year. Come down to trade maybe twice a season. You live alone, all the way up there? I prefer it that way. There was something final in his tone, a door closing on further questions. Then his expression shifted, became concerned. Where were you headed? Where's your family? The grief hit Sarah like a physical blow. They died, she said quietly. Cholera, 2 days ago. It was just the 3 of us, and now it is just me. Brennan's face darkened. I'm sorry. That is a hard thing. I was trying to make it to the next town. I thought if I could just keep moving, keep the wagon going, I would be all right. But then those men found me this morning. And I knew... She stopped, swallowing hard. I knew I was not going to make it. You would have, Brennan said firmly. You have the look of a fighter about you. I do not feel like much of a fighter right now. Fighters rarely do. That is what makes them fighters. He stood up, testing his wounded arm. Blood was already seeping through the bandana, but he moved as if it did not bother him at all. We need to get you somewhere safe. The nearest settlement is a mining camp called Silver Creek, about 20 miles west. I can take you there, get you on a stage to wherever you need to go. 20 miles? Sarah looked at the sun, already past its zenith. That will take days. 2, if we move steady. I know a place we can camp tonight, a cave I use sometimes when I'm hunting in this area. It is defensible, got water nearby. Those outlaws might come back with friends, so we should not stay here. Sarah nodded, too exhausted to argue. She felt as if she had lived a lifetime in the past few hours. Brennan helped her gather what she needed from the wagon. Most of her belongings had been ransacked by the outlaws before he arrived, but she managed to salvage some clothes, a little food, and the small leather case that held her sewing supplies and the few pieces of jewelry her mother had left her. Brennan lifted her trunk as if it weighed nothing, his massive arms flexing beneath his shirt sleeves, and secured it to his horse, a huge bay gelding that looked strong enough to carry a buffalo. What about the wagon? Sarah asked. Leave it. Anyone comes across it will know to leave it be. I will mark it. He pulled his knife again and carved a symbol into the wagon's side, something that looked like 2 crossed lines with a circle around them. That is my mark. Folks around here know not to touch anything that bears it. You must have quite a reputation. Some would say that. He did not sound particularly proud of the fact. They set out walking, Brennan leading his horse with Sarah riding side saddle on the gelding's broad back. The afternoon sun was warm on Sarah's face, but she could feel autumn in the air. That sharp edge that promised winter was not far behind. They followed no trail that she could see, but Brennan moved through the wilderness as if he had a map imprinted in his mind, never hesitating, never second-guessing his direction. How long have you lived out here? Sarah asked after they had been walking for an hour. Near about 10 years now. You were not always a mountain man then? Brennan was quiet for so long, Sarah thought he might not answer. Then he said, No, I was a soldier once, fought in the war. Sarah did the math in her head. The Civil War had ended 7 years ago. He would have been young, maybe 20 or so. For the Union or the Confederacy? Union. I was born in Pennsylvania, joined up in 61 when I was 18. Thought I was going to save the world. His laugh was bitter. War teaches you different. My father fought for the Union too, Sarah said softly. He died at Antietam. Brennan looked up at her and something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. They had both lost things to that war, both carried scars that did not show. After it ended, Brennan continued, I could not go back to regular life, could not stand being around people, hearing their talk about honor and glory. So I came west, kept moving until I found a place where the only voices I heard were the wind and the wolves, built my cabin and figured I would live out my days there in peace. That sounds lonely. Lonely is safe. Lonely does not die on you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with old grief. Sarah wanted to ask what he meant, who he had lost, but she sensed the walls going up again and let the subject drop. They walked in silence for another hour, climbing higher into the foothills. The land here was beautiful, in a wild, untamed way that Sarah had never experienced before. In St. Louis, even the parks had been cultivated, controlled. Here, nature sprawled in every direction without apology or restraint. Pine trees towered overhead, their branches singing in the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, the sound lonely and fierce. Sarah found herself watching Brennan as he walked. Despite his wound, he moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for a man his size. His shoulders were so broad they blocked out the sun when he walked in front of her, and she could see the play of muscle beneath his shirt with every step. He should have looked frightening, this massive, scarred man with his wild hair and uncivilized ways. But Sarah felt safer with him than she had felt in months. Maybe safer than she had ever felt. The thought startled her. She barely knew this man. He had pulled a bullet from his own arm without even flinching, lived alone in the mountains like a hermit, probably had killed men without losing sleep over it. He was everything her aunt would have warned her against, everything proper society would have condemned. And yet when he turned to help her down from the horse as they reached a narrow stream, his hands were gentle, his touch careful. When he steadied her on the rocky bank, she felt the strength in him, coiled and controlled, used only to protect. "We will water the horse here," Brennan said. "You should drink too. It is good water, clean from the snowmelt." Sarah knelt by the stream and cupped her hands, bringing the icy water to her lips. It tasted like nothing she had ever drunk before, pure and bright and alive. She drank until her stomach ached, then splashed some on her face, washing away the trail dust and the lingering fear from the morning's attack. When she looked up, Brennan was watching her, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met and held, and Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, some tectonic movement of the heart. "Your arm," she said, breaking the moment. "The bleeding has not stopped." Brennan glanced down at his sleeve, now thoroughly soaked with blood. "It will. You need a proper bandage, a clean one." Sarah stood and went to where her trunk was secured to the horse. She opened it and pulled out one of her petticoats, the white linen soft and clean. "Here, let me help you." "I cannot take your clothing." "You can and you will." Sarah's voice was firm. "You saved my life today, Mr. Brennan. The least I can do is make sure you do not bleed to death because of it." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, barely visible beneath his beard. "Just Brennan, and all right if you insist." Sarah tore the petticoat into strips while Brennan removed his shirt. She tried not to stare, but it was impossible. His chest and arms were thick with muscle, scarred and weathered, the body of a man who had spent years testing himself against nature and surviving. The bullet wound looked angry and raw, but the bleeding had slowed to a seep. She unwrapped the blood-soaked bandana and washed the wound as gently as she could with water from the stream. Brennan sat perfectly still, watching her face rather than her hands. Sarah could feel the weight of his gaze, could feel the heat of his skin beneath her fingers. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped the clean linen around his arm, tying it snugly but not too tight. "There," she said, stepping back. "That should hold until we can get you proper medical attention." "You have a good hand," Brennan said. "Steady, thank you." He pulled his shirt back on, moving carefully now, and Sarah realized he was in more pain than he had let on. The bullet extraction, the walking, the blood loss. It was all taking its toll. But he would never admit it, she knew. Men like Brennan did not admit weakness. "How much farther to this cave?" she asked. "Another 2 hours, maybe 3. We should keep moving. I want to get there before dark." They continued on, climbing higher into the mountains. The terrain grew rougher, the path steeper, and Sarah was grateful for the horse's steady gait. The sun moved lower in the sky, painting the clouds gold and orange and deep purple. The temperature dropped as the light faded, and Sarah wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Brennan moved slower now, his limp more pronounced. Sarah wanted to tell him to rest, to let her walk so he could ride, but she knew he would refuse. So she stayed quiet and watched him, ready to help if he stumbled. He never did. They reached the cave just as the last light was draining from the sky. It was set into the side of a cliff, the opening wide enough for the horse to enter comfortably. Inside, the space opened up into a natural chamber about 20 feet across, the ceiling high enough that Brennan could stand upright with room to spare. Someone had camped here before. Brennan, Sarah assumed. There was a fire ring made of stones, some old firewood stacked against one wall, even a few animal pelts laid out as makeshift bedding. "It is not much," Brennan said, "but it will keep us warm and dry." "It is perfect," Sarah said, and meant it. After days of sleeping in the open wagon, the cove felt like a palace. Brennan unsaddled his horse and settled the animal near the cave entrance where it could graze on the grass growing just outside. Then, he set about building a fire, his movements efficient despite his injury. Soon, flames were crackling in the fire ring, filling the cave with warmth and dancing light. Sarah unpacked the food she had salvaged from the wagon: some hardtack, dried meat, a few potatoes, and half a loaf of bread that was only slightly stale. It was not much, but Brennan produced a pot from somewhere in his saddlebags and soon had the potatoes boiling over the fire. He added some wild onions he dug up near the cave entrance and a handful of something green he picked from the rocks. "Miner's lettuce," he explained when Sarah gave him a questioning look. "Good for you, keeps the scurvy away." They ate in companionable silence, too hungry and tired for much conversation. The food was simple but good, and Sarah found herself eating more than she had in days. When they finished, Brennan leaned back against the cave wall and closed his eyes, his face drawn with exhaustion and pain. "You should rest," Sarah said softly. "I can keep watch." "You do not know what to watch for." "Then teach me." Brennan opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "You are not like most women I have met, Sarah Mitchell." "I will take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. He shifted, trying to find a comfortable position. "All right. If you hear anything moving outside the cave, anything bigger than a rabbit, you wake me immediately. Do not try to investigate on your own. Could be a bear, could be a mountain lion, could be those outlaws tracking us. Whatever it is, I need to know." "I understand. And Sarah?" His voice was serious. "Do not leave the cave, not for any reason. These mountains at night, they can swallow a person whole. You get turned around even just a few feet from the entrance, and you might never find your way back." "I promise." Brennan nodded, satisfied. He stretched out on the animal pelts, his wounded arm cradled against his chest. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened into sleep. Sarah sat by the fire, feeding it small sticks to keep it burning, and watched Brennan sleep. In the firelight, he looked younger. Some of the hard lines of his face softened. She thought about what he had done today, tracking down the outlaws who had attacked her, taking a bullet, cutting it out of his own flesh without hesitation, and then walking for hours to get her to safety. All without asking for anything in return, without expecting gratitude or reward. Who was this man? What had shaped him into someone who could survive alone in this wilderness, who could perform his own surgery without flinching, who could be so hard and yet so unexpectedly gentle? Sarah felt something stirring in her chest, something that felt dangerously like affection. She tried to push it away. She had known Brennan for less than a day. She was grieving her aunt and uncle, displaced, vulnerable. These feelings were not real, just a natural response to being rescued, to finding safety in the midst of chaos. But as she watched him sleep, watched the rise and fall of his chest, the way his hand unconsciously reached to protect his wounded arm even in dreams, she could not quite convince herself. The night wore on. Sarah kept her vigil, listening to the sounds of the wilderness outside the cave. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming snow. The fire crackled and popped, casting wild shadows on the cave walls. Sarah must have dozed off because she woke with a start to find Brennan sitting up, alert, his hand on his pistol. "What is it?" she whispered. "Thought I heard something." He listened, head cocked. Then he relaxed slightly. "Just a deer. Nothing to worry about. I'm sorry, I was supposed to be keeping watch. You are exhausted. No shame in sleeping." He looked at the fire, which had burned down to embers. "Get some rest. I will take watch now." "Your arm is fine. Go on, Sarah. You need sleep more than I do." She wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. She lay down on the pelts Brennan had vacated, and his warmth still lingered in them. The scent of him surrounded her, wood smoke and leather and something wild she could not name. It should not have been comforting, but it was. She fell asleep with the sound of Brennan moving around the cave, tending the fire, keeping watch, keeping her safe. Morning came cold and bright. Sarah woke to find Brennan already up, the fire rebuilt and coffee brewing in his battered tin pot. The smell alone was enough to make her smile. "Good morning," she said, sitting up and stretching. "Morning." Brennan poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed one to her. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks." She took a sip of the coffee, strong and black and perfect. "How's your arm?" "Stiff, but it will heal." He rolled up his sleeve to show her the bandage. It was spotted with blood, but not soaked through. "Your doctoring held up well." "I'm glad." Sarah stood and walked to the cave entrance. Outside, the world was painted in morning gold, the mountains rising majesty into a sky so blue it hurt to look at. "It is beautiful here." "It is." Brennan came to stand beside her. "I never get tired of looking at it." They stood in silence for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, watching the day begin. Then Brennan said, "We should eat something and get moving. I want to reach Silver Creek by nightfall." They ate a quick breakfast of leftover bread and dried meat, then packed up and set out. The morning was crisp, their breath visible in the cold air. Brennan moved better today, the rest having done him good, though Sarah noticed he favored his wounded arm. The trail, if it could be called that, led them through dense forest and across rushing streams. Several times they had to dismount and lead the horse over particularly treacherous ground. Brennan was always there, his hand ready to steady Sarah, his presence a constant reassurance. "You know these mountains well," Sarah observed as they paused to rest beside a waterfall. "I have had 10 years to learn them. Every trail, every game path, every place where water can be found. A man could live his whole life up here and never see another soul if he wanted." "Is that what you want?" Brennan looked at her and something flickered in his gray eyes. "It was. Before." "Before what?" "Before yesterday." He said it simply, but the words carried weight. "Before you." Sarah's heart skipped. "Brennan, I know. I'm just a stranger who happened along. You do not know me, do not owe me anything. But Sarah, I have been alone for so long, I forgot what it felt like to have someone to protect, someone to care about. And now?" He stopped, shook his head. "Never mind. Forget I said anything. I cannot forget it." Sarah stepped closer to him, close enough to see the amber flecks in his gray eyes. "Because I feel it too. I know it is foolish, I know it makes no sense, but there is something between us. I felt it from the moment I saw you. You were terrified and I was covered in blood. That is not exactly a promising beginning." "Maybe not. But here we are." Brennan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not, he cupped her face in his calloused hand, his touch impossibly gentle. "You are meant for better things than a half-wild mountain man, Sarah Mitchell. You are educated, refined. You should be in some parlor somewhere, drinking tea and talking about poetry, not standing in the middle of nowhere with a man who does not even own a proper roof." "I do not want tea and poetry," Sarah said fiercely. "I want to feel alive, I want to feel safe, and when I am with you, I feel both." "Sarah." Her name was a prayer and a warning all at once. "Kiss me," she whispered. "Please." Brennan hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then he bent his head and pressed his lips to hers, and Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might break. But when she wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, he deepened the kiss, his free arm coming around her waist to hold her against him. He tasted like coffee and mountain air and promise. Sarah had been kissed before, awkward, fumbling attempts by suitors her aunt had approved of. But nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing had prepared her for the way Brennan kissed her, like she was precious, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brennan rested his forehead against hers. "This is probably a mistake," he said. "Probably," Sarah agreed. "I do not care. We have known each other less than a day. I feel like I have known you forever." Brennan pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. I am not an easy man. I have been alone too long, have seen too much. I have nightmares that wake me screaming. I have days where I cannot stand to be around anyone. I am damaged goods. We are all damaged, Sarah said. That is just being human. The question is, do you want to be damaged alone or would you rather try being damaged together? A slow smile spread across Brennan's face, transforming it. Damaged together. I like the sound of that. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Sarah felt herself falling, tumbling headlong into something she did not understand but desperately wanted. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools. We should keep moving, Brennan said, though he made no move to step away from her. Yes, we should. Neither of them moved. Finally, Brennan laughed, the sound rusty but genuine, as if he had not used it in a long time. Come on, the sooner we get to Silver Creek, the sooner we can figure out what happens next. They walked hand in hand for a while, until the terrain grew too rough and they needed both hands to navigate. But even then, Brennan stayed close, his presence a constant warmth at Sarah's back. The day wore on, the sun climbing high and then beginning its descent. They stopped briefly for lunch, sharing the last of Sarah's bread and some jerky from Brennan's supplies. He pointed out landmarks as they walked, teaching her to read the wilderness the way he did. See that bent tree there? That means the prevailing wind comes from the west. And those scratches on the bark? Bear marking his territory. We give that area a wide berth. How did you learn all this? Sarah asked. Trial and error mostly. Books too, when I first came out here. I read everything I could get my hands on about wilderness survival, and I learned from the natives when they were willing to teach me. The Shoshone have been living in these mountains for thousands of years. They know things we white men have forgotten or never learned. You respect them. Of course, they belong to this land in a way we never will. I am just a guest here. Sarah thought of the stories she had heard in St. Louis, the tales of savage Indians and brave settlers. Looking at Brennan, at his respect for the land and its original inhabitants, those stories felt hollow and false. You are not like other men I have met, she said. Good or bad? Good. Definitely good. They reached Silver Creek just as the sun was setting. The mining camp sprawled across a narrow valley, a chaotic collection of tents and rough wooden buildings. Sarah could hear the sound of hammering, of men shouting, of a piano playing badly in what she assumed was a saloon. After the silence of the mountains, it felt overwhelming. Not much to look at, Brennan said, but it has a hotel of sorts and a stage that runs to Sacramento twice a month. We can get you on it, get you to where you were going. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. Sacramento. Her original destination, her original dream. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had made those plans. What if I do not want to go to Sacramento, she said. Brennan stopped walking and turned to look at her. What do you mean? I mean, what if I wanted to stay here, in Silver Creek or nearby? What if I wanted to stay close to you? Sarah, there is nothing for you here. This is a rough place full of rough men. You deserve better. Stop telling me what I deserve, Sarah said, frustration creeping into her voice. I am an adult woman, capable of making my own decisions, and I have decided that I do not want to walk away from this from you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You do not know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that for the first time since my aunt and uncle died, since they got sick, maybe for the first time in years, I feel like I have a purpose. I feel like I have found something worth fighting for. And that something is you, Jacob Brennan. Brennan stared at her, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he said, All right. All right. All right. If you want to stay, then stay. But you need to know what you're getting into. Life out here is hard. Winters are brutal. Resources are scarce. And I am not rich, Sarah. I do not have much to offer you. I do not need much. I just need you. This time, when Brennan pulled her into his arms, he held her like she was the most valuable thing in the world. Sarah buried her face in his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. She felt him press a kiss to the top of her head, felt his arms tighten around her. Then I am yours, he said quietly, for as long as you will have me. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other as the sun set behind the mountains and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Then Brennan stepped back and took her hand. Come on, let us get you settled for the night. Tomorrow we can figure out the rest. The Silver Creek Hotel was a generous name for what was essentially a large boarding house with pretensions. But the rooms were clean, the beds were comfortable, and the proprietor, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Callahan, took one look at Sarah's exhausted face and immediately went into mother mode. "You poor dear, you look absolutely worn through. Come, come, I will draw you a bath and get you some proper food. Is this your husband?" "No, Sarah started to explain, but Brennan cut her off. "Her protector, ma'am. Miss Mitchell had some trouble on the trail. I was fortunate enough to be nearby to help." Mrs. Callahan looked between them, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Then she smiled. "I see. Well, protector or not, you both look like you could use a good meal and a good night's sleep. Mr. Brennan, I assume you know your way around town." "Yes, ma'am. I will be staying at the camp on the north side." "Nonsense. I have rooms enough. You will stay here where I can keep an eye on that arm. Do not think I have not noticed you bleeding through your shirt, young man." Brennan looked like he wanted to argue, but something about Mrs. Callahan's expression told him it would be useless. "Thank you, ma'am. That is very kind." "It is settled, then. Now both of you go wash up. Supper will be ready in an hour." Sarah was shown to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. True to her word, Mrs. Callahan had a copper tub filled with hot water within minutes. Sarah sank into it with a sigh of pure relief, washing away days of trail dust and fear and exhaustion. She scrubbed her hair 3 times before she felt clean, then dried off and dressed in one of the few dresses she had salvaged from the wagon, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. When she came downstairs, she found Brennan waiting in the dining room. He had washed as well, and someone had trimmed his beard and tied his hair back. He wore a clean shirt, borrowed probably, given how tight it was across his shoulders, and for the first time, Sarah could see the man beneath the mountain man persona. He was handsome, she realized with a start. Truly, devastatingly handsome. He stood when he saw her, his eyes widening. "Sarah, you look clean," she suggested with a smile. "Beautiful. You look beautiful." Sarah blushed, pleasure warming her cheeks. "So do you. Different, but good." They sat down to supper with Mrs. Callahan and 3 other boarders, 2 miners and a traveling merchant. The food was simple but plentiful: roast chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Sarah ate until she thought she might burst, savoring every bite. The conversation flowed around the table, the miners telling stories about their latest finds, the merchant complaining about the roads. Brennan was quiet, but Sarah noticed him watching her, his gaze warm and constant. After supper, Mrs. Callahan shooed everyone out of the dining room so she could clean up. Sarah and Brennan found themselves standing awkwardly in the hallway, suddenly unsure what to do with themselves. "Walk with me?" Brennan suggested. "The town has a main street that is reasonably safe after dark." "I would like that." They stepped out into the cool evening air and began walking. Silver Creek at night was a different creature than during the day. Lights glowed in windows, music spilled from the saloons, and the streets were full of men heading home from the mines or heading out for an evening of drinking and gambling. "This is my first time in a mining town," Sarah admitted. "It is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I do not know. More chaos, I suppose. More violence." "Oh, there is plenty of that, but there is also community. These men, they come out here looking for gold, but what they find is each other. They form friendships, partnerships. Some of them will go home rich, most will go home empty-handed, but they will all go home with stories." Will you ever go home, do you think? Back to Pennsylvania?" Brennan shook his head. "No, this is my home now, the mountains, the wilderness. I could not go back to civilization even if I wanted to. Then I suppose it is a good thing I am planning to stay." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Sarah, I need you to be certain about this. I need you to think about what you are giving up. You could go to Sacramento, open your dress shop like you planned, make a proper life for yourself." "I could," Sarah agreed, "but I would be doing it alone. And I am tired of being alone, Brennan. I have been alone since my father died, since my mother passed a year later. My aunt and uncle were kind, but they were not family, not really. They were obligation, duty. But you—" She reached up and cupped his face, feeling the softness of his beard beneath her palm. "You make me feel like I belong somewhere, like I have finally found what I have been looking for." I feel the same, Brennan said roughly. From the moment I saw you, saw your courage, even in the face of those outlaws, I knew you were different, special. And then when you helped me with the bullet, when you did not flinch or run, I started to think maybe I could have this. Have you. Have something real. You can. We can. Sarah pulled him down and kissed him, right there in the middle of Silver Creek's main street, not caring who saw. Brennan kissed her back with a desperation that matched her own, his arms coming around her to lift her nearly off her feet. When they broke apart, both breathless, Brennan rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Sarah's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me. I know it is too soon. I know I should court you properly. But Sarah, I am not a man who does things by halves. I want you in my life, not just for now, but forever. Say yes." "Yes," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, of course, yes." Brennan picked her up and spun her around, both of them grinning like idiots. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Sarah thought she might die from happiness. "Tomorrow," Brennan said. "We will find a preacher tomorrow and make it official. Then I will take you up to the cabin, show you the life we can build together. It will not be easy, Sarah. I want you to know that. The winters are long and cold. Supplies can be scarce, and it is just us up there, alone together." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "I do not want easy. I want real. I want you." They walked back to the hotel, hand in hand, making plans, talking about the future. Sarah felt as if she was floating, as if her feet barely touched the ground. She had lost so much, her parents, her aunt and uncle, her original dreams, but somehow, in losing everything, she had found this, found him, found a love she had not known existed. Mrs. Callahan was waiting for them when they returned, a knowing smile on her face. "I see congratulations are in order," she said. "How did you—" Sarah started. "Dear child, I saw the way he looked at you the moment you walked through my door. A woman would have to be blind not to see that man is head over heels in love with you." She turned to Brennan. "You take care of her, you hear me? She is something special." "I know she is," Brennan said seriously. "And I will, I swear it." "Good. Now off to bed, both of you. You have a wedding to plan tomorrow." Sarah went to her room in a daze of happiness. She undressed and crawled into bed, but sleep eluded her. Her mind was spinning with everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. 2 days ago she had been alone and grieving, terrified she would not survive the journey. Now she was engaged to a mountain man she had just met, planning a life in the wilderness. It was insane. It was irrational. It was absolutely perfect. A soft knock on her door made her sit up. "Yes?" "It is me," Brennan's voice came from the other side. "I wanted to check on you, make sure you are all right." Sarah got out of bed and opened the door. Brennan stood in the hallway, his hair loose around his shoulders, his shirt unlaced at the throat. In the dim lamplight, he looked like something out of a storybook, a hero from a fairy tale. "I'm more than all right," Sarah said. "Come in, just for a moment." Brennan hesitated, then stepped inside. Sarah closed the door behind him and turned to face him. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for everything, for saving me, for caring for me, for asking me to marry you. I know I have not said it properly, but thank you, Brennan, for giving me my life back." "You do not need to thank me. Sarah, you saved me too. I did not realize how empty my life was until you walked into it. You reminded me what it means to be human, to care about someone other than myself." Sarah stepped close to him and laid her hand over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady beneath her palm. "I love you," she said. "I know it is too soon. I know we barely know each other. But I love you, Jacob Brennan. I think I have loved you since the moment you stepped between me and those outlaws." "Sarah." Brennan caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her palm. "I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. You are my second chance, my redemption. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You already are." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Sarah felt herself melting into him. His arms came around her, holding her close, and she could feel the heat of his body through the thin fabric of her nightgown. The kiss went on and on, both of them lost in each other, in the promise of what was to come. Finally, Brennan pulled back, breathing hard. "I should go," he said. "Before I do something we might regret." "I would not regret it," Sarah said boldly. "Maybe not tonight, but I want to do this right. I want to marry you first, make you my wife properly. Can you wait for me? Just one more day?" "I can wait," Sarah said, though every fiber of her being was screaming at him to stay. One more day. Brennan kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips one more time. "Sleep well, Sarah. Tomorrow we start our life together." "Tomorrow," Sarah echoed. He slipped out of the room, and Sarah stood staring at the closed door for a long moment before returning to bed. This time, sleep came easily, and she dreamed of mountains and wide blue skies and strong arms holding her safe. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Sarah dressed carefully in her best dress, a green silk that had belonged to her mother. It was a bit wrinkled from travel, but Mrs. Callahan helped her press it, and when Sarah looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed, her whole face glowing with happiness. "You make a beautiful bride," Mrs. Callahan said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Thank you. For everything. For taking us in, for helping us." "Hush now." "It is my pleasure, dear. Now come. Your young man is waiting downstairs, and he looks like he's about to wear a hole in my floor with all his pacing." Sarah laughed and followed Mrs. Callahan downstairs. Brennan was indeed pacing in the front parlor, but he stopped dead when he saw her. "Sarah," he breathed, "you are stunning." He looked pretty stunning himself. Someone, probably Mrs. Callahan, had found him proper clothes to wear, a dark suit that fit him surprisingly well despite his size. His hair was brushed back from his face, his beard neatly trimmed. He looked civilized and wild at the same time, tamed but not broken. "Are you ready?" he asked, offering her his arm. "I am ready." The preacher lived in a small house on the edge of town. He was a kind-faced man named Reverend Michaels, who asked no questions about their sudden engagement and seemed genuinely happy to marry them. Mrs. Callahan and her husband served as witnesses, both of them beaming like proud parents. The ceremony was short and simple. Sarah and Brennan stood before the preacher and exchanged vows, their hands clasped together, their eyes locked on each other. When Reverend Michaels pronounced them husband and wife, when Brennan bent to kiss her, Sarah felt something settle in her chest, something that had been restless and searching for years, finally finding its home. They were married. She was Sarah Brennan now, wife to a mountain man, bound to him in every way that mattered. After the ceremony, Mrs. Callahan insisted on throwing them a small celebration dinner. The other boarders joined in, along with a few of Brennan's acquaintances from town. It was loud and cheerful, full of toasts and laughter and good wishes. Sarah had never felt so welcomed, so included. As the evening wore on, Brennan leaned close to her and whispered, "Are you happy?" "Happier than I have ever been," Sarah said truthfully. "Good. Because tomorrow I'm taking you home, to the cabin, to our life." "I cannot wait." That night, Sarah and Brennan shared a room for the first time as husband and wife. Brennan was gentle with her, patient, taking his time to show her all the ways a man could love a woman. Sarah had been raised to think of the marriage bed as a duty, an obligation, but with Brennan, it was anything but. It was joy and passion and connection, two souls finding each other in the darkness and holding on tight. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Brennan's arms wrapped around her, her head on his chest. Sarah listened to his heartbeat and felt more at peace than she had ever felt in her life. "I was so scared," she whispered. "When my aunt and uncle died, when I was alone on the trail, I was so scared I would not survive, that I would die out there and no one would ever know or care." "I would have cared," Brennan said fiercely. "If I had known you existed, I would have torn apart the mountains looking for you. We found each other. That is what matters." "Yes, we found each other." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Sleep now, wife. Tomorrow's the start of our adventure." Sarah smiled against his chest and let herself drift off, safe in her husband's arms. They left Silver Creek 2 days later, once Brennan had stocked up on supplies for the winter. The townspeople came out to see them off, Mrs. Callahan crying openly, pressing a basket of food into Sarah's hands and making her promise to visit in the spring. The journey to Brennan's cabin took 3 days, climbing higher and deeper into the mountains with each passing mile. The terrain was rough, but Brennan knew every inch of it, guiding them safely through treacherous passes and across rushing streams. At night, they made camp beneath the stars, and Brennan taught Sarah how to build a proper fire, how to read the weather in the clouds, how to move quietly so as not to startle the wildlife. Sarah absorbed it all like a sponge, eager to learn, eager to prove she could handle this life. Brennan watched her with something like wonder in his eyes, as if he could not quite believe she was real. On the third day, they crested a ridge and Brennan pointed. "There, that is home." Sarah looked where he was pointing and saw a valley spread out below them, a hidden paradise tucked between two mountain peaks. A stream ran through the center, glittering in the afternoon sun. And there, on the western edge of the valley, was a cabin. It was small but solidly built, logs chinked tight against the weather, a stone chimney rising from one end. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Sarah realized Brennan must have banked the fire before he left on his hunting trip, the trip that had led him to her. "It is perfect," she breathed. "It is rough," Brennan warned. "Just one room, really? I built it to survive, not to be pretty." "I do not care. It is ours. That makes it perfect." They rode down into the valley, and with each step Sarah felt her excitement growing. This was it. This was her new home, her new life. Everything she had known before, the cities, the society, the expectations, all of it fell away until there was only this, the mountains, the wilderness, and the man she loved. Brennan helped her down from the horse and unlocked the cabin door. Inside was a single large room, dominated by a stone fireplace at one end and a rough-hewn bed at the other. There was a table with two chairs, shelves stocked with supplies, hooks on the walls for hanging coats and tools. It was simple and spare, but Sarah could see the care Brennan had put into building it. Every log fit snugly, every joint was tight. It was the home of a man who knew how to survive, who respected the land and the weather and the forces of nature. "We can add on," Brennan said, watching her face anxiously. "Build another room, maybe two, make it more comfortable." "I love it just as it is," Sarah said, "but yes, let us build on. Let us make it ours together." Brennan grinned and swept her into his arms, carrying her over the threshold like a proper groom. Sarah laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck, and when he set her down, they were both smiling so wide their faces hurt. That first week in the cabin was a revelation. Brennan showed Sarah everything she needed to know about living in the wilderness. He taught her to hunt, to fish, to trap. He showed her which plants were edible and which were poisonous, how to preserve meat for the winter, how to tan hides for clothing and blankets. Sarah worked alongside him, her hands growing calloused and strong, her body adapting to the physical demands of mountain life. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk for hours. Brennan told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, about his parents who had died of fever when he was 16, about the war and the things he had seen and done that still haunted him. Sarah told him about growing up in St. Louis, about losing her parents, about her dreams of independence and freedom. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs. Sarah discovered that Brennan sometimes woke in the night, gasping from nightmares he could not explain. She learned to hold him through them, to whisper soft reassurances, until he calmed. Brennan learned that Sarah needed space sometimes, needed to be alone with her thoughts. He would go hunting on those days, giving her time to herself, trusting that she would be there when he returned. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in mid-October. Sarah watched from the cabin window as the valley transformed into a wonderland of white, the mountains disappearing behind curtains of falling snow. Brennan spent long days cutting and stacking firewood, making sure they would have enough to last until spring. Sarah worked on sewing warm clothes for both of them, using the furs Brennan had trapped and tanned. They were snowed in by early November, the passes completely blocked. Sarah had been nervous about being isolated, about spending months with no one but Brennan for company. But as the weeks passed, she realized she had never been happier. They worked together, cooked together, read together from the few books Brennan owned. They made love by firelight and slept wrapped in each other's arms, and Sarah felt herself falling deeper in love with her mountain man every single day. Christmas came and went, marked only by the fact that Brennan managed to shoot a wild turkey for their dinner. Sarah made a small evergreen wreath for the door and felt ridiculously pleased with herself. On Christmas night, as they sat by the fire, Brennan gave her a gift, a comb he had carved from wood, the handle decorated with delicate flowers. "I'm not much of an artist," he said shyly, "but I wanted you to have something." Sarah turned the comb over in her hands, marveling at the craftsmanship. Each flower was different, carved with such care and attention to detail. "It is beautiful," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you." "I love you," Brennan said. "I know I do not say it often enough, but Sarah, you are everything to me, my whole world." "I love you too," Sarah whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." January brought brutal cold and more snow. They stayed inside for days at a time, venturing out only to feed the horse and gather firewood from the covered stack Brennan had built. Sarah learned to make soap, to card wool, to do all the small tasks that kept a household running. Her hands were no longer soft, her nails no longer clean, but she was stronger than she had ever been, both physically and mentally. In February, Sarah realized she had missed her monthly bleeding. She waited another week to be sure, then told Brennan one night as they lay in bed. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Brennan went very still beside her. Then he sat up, lighting the lamp so he could see her face. "Are you certain?" "Not completely, but my body feels different, and I have been sick in the mornings." A slow smile spread across Brennan's face, growing until he was grinning like a madman. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Sarah asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know we did not plan this, that it is happening so fast." "Happy?" Brennan laughed and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Sarah, I'm beyond happy. I'm terrified and elated and grateful all at once. A child, our child. I never thought I would have this, a family of my own." Sarah relaxed against him, relief flooding through her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I do not know the first thing about being a mother, and out here with no doctor nearby." "We will figure it out," Brennan said firmly. "Together. And come spring, we will go down to Silver Creek. Talk to Mrs. Callahan. She has birthed more babies than any doctor. She will help us prepare." "All right," Sarah said. "Together." The rest of the winter passed in a haze of planning and preparation. Brennan started work on an addition to the cabin, a second room that could serve as a nursery. He worked whenever the weather allowed, his wounded arm long since healed, his body strong and capable. Sarah sewed tiny clothes and knitted blankets, her hands constantly busy. Spring came slowly, the snow melting inch by inch, revealing the green valley beneath. By April, the passes were clear enough to travel, and Brennan and Sarah made the journey down to Silver Creek. Mrs. Callahan was beside herself with joy when she heard the news, immediately taking charge of Sarah's care. "You are thin, girl," she scolded. "Not eating enough, I would wager. Mountain life is hard on women, especially pregnant ones. You need to eat more, rest more. I will give you a list of what you need, and Brennan, you make sure she follows it." "Yes, ma'am," Brennan said meekly. They stayed in Silver Creek for a week, stocking up on supplies and letting Sarah rest. The town had grown since their last visit, new buildings going up, more families arriving. It was still rough and unpolished, but Sarah could see the potential, could see the community taking root. On their last day in town, they visited Reverend Michaels, and Sarah asked him to bless their coming child. The Reverend was happy to oblige, placing his hand on Sarah's still flat stomach and offering a prayer for the baby's health and the mother's safety. Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks, overcome with gratitude and love and hope for the future. They returned to the cabin just as the valley was coming fully alive with spring. Wildflowers bloomed everywhere, painting the meadow in shades of purple and yellow and red. The stream ran high and fast with snowmelt, and the air was alive with birdsong. Sarah had never seen anything more beautiful. As her pregnancy progressed, Brennan became almost comically protective. He would not let her lift anything heavy, would not let her work for more than an hour at a time, insisted she rest every afternoon. Sarah protested at first, but secretly she loved it, loved being cared for so completely. Summer came, hot and bright. Sarah's belly swelled and she felt the baby moving inside her, tiny flutters at first, then strong kicks that made her gasp. Brennan loved to put his hand on her stomach and feel the baby move, his face full of wonder and joy. "A boy," he would say. "I think it is a boy." "Or a girl," Sarah would counter. "I have a feeling it might be a girl." "Boy or girl, as long as the baby is healthy, I do not care." In August, Sarah's pains started. Brennan immediately saddled the horse ready to ride for Silver Creek and bring back Mrs. Callahan. But Sarah stopped him. "There is no time," she said, breathing through a contraction. "The baby is coming now." Brennan went pale. "But I do not know what to do. I have never delivered a baby." "Then I guess we learn together," Sarah said, trying to smile even through the pain. Brennan helped her to the bed and then did exactly what Sarah told him to do, following her instructions as she labored to bring their child into the world. The afternoon stretched into evening, then night. Sarah pushed and screamed and cried, and Brennan stayed beside her the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her face, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was of her. And then, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry split the air. Brennan caught the slippery, squalling infant and stared at it in shock. "A boy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Sarah, we have a son." Sarah laughed and cried at the same time, reaching for the baby. Brennan placed him in her arms, and Sarah looked down at the tiny, perfect face of her child, her son, and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Brennan sat on the bed beside her, his arm around her shoulders, both of them staring at the baby in awe. "What should we name him?" he asked. Sarah thought for a moment, then said, "Thomas, after my father. Thomas Jacob Brennan." "Thomas," Brennan repeated. "I like it. Thomas Jacob Brennan. Welcome to the world, son." The baby opened his eyes, gray like his father's, and looked up at them with the unfocused gaze of the newborn. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming love. "We did it," she said. "We made a family." "We did," Brennan agreed. He kissed her forehead, then kissed the baby's. "I love you both more than life itself." The first weeks with Thomas were exhausting and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Sarah had no idea what she was doing, but she learned quickly, guided by instinct and by the advice Mrs. Callahan had given her. Brennan was a surprisingly natural father, patient and gentle with the baby, happy to walk him for hours when he cried or change his diapers without complaint. They fell into a new rhythm, their life rearranging itself around this tiny new person. Sarah spent most of her time nursing and caring for Thomas, while Brennan took over more of the household duties. He hunted and cooked and cleaned, never once complaining about the change in their routine. In September, they took Thomas down to Silver Creek to show him off. Mrs. Callahan wept openly when she held him, pronouncing him the most beautiful baby she had ever seen. The whole town seemed to celebrate with them, and Sarah realized they had become part of this community, this rough collection of miners and merchants and dreamers. That winter was harder than the first, simply because they had a baby to care for. But it was also sweeter, watching Thomas grow and change, seeing his personality start to emerge. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, fascinated by everything around him. He had Brennan's gray eyes and Sarah's nose, and Sarah thought he was the most perfect thing she had ever seen. The years passed quickly after that, marked by the seasons and by Thomas's growth. He learned to walk, to talk, to follow his father around like a shadow. Brennan taught him everything he knew about the wilderness, and Thomas absorbed it all with the eager curiosity of childhood. When Thomas was 3, Sarah gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace. Brennan had finished the additions to the cabin by then, and they had a proper house now, with 3 bedrooms and a real kitchen. It was still rustic by city standards, but to Sarah, it was a palace. The girls were complete opposites from the start. Emma was bold and adventurous, always getting into trouble, while Grace was quiet and thoughtful, content to sit and watch the world go by. Sarah and Brennan had their hands full, but they would not have changed a thing. More years passed. Thomas grew tall and strong like his father. Emma and Grace grew into beautiful young women. They raised animals now, chickens and goats and even a few cattle that they grazed in the meadow during summer. The cabin had grown into a proper homestead, and Sarah had her garden, vibrant and productive. They were not rich, not by any measure, but they had everything that mattered, each other, their children, their land, and their health. Sarah sometimes thought back to that terrified woman on the wagon trail, alone and afraid, and could barely recognize herself. That woman had been lost. This woman was found. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Brennan surprised Sarah by taking her back to the spot where they had first met. The area had changed. The wagon was long gone. The forest had reclaimed the trail. But Sarah recognized it instantly. "This is where my life really started," she said, standing in the clearing where Brennan had fought off the outlaws all those years ago. "Mine too," Brennan said. He took her hand, and Sarah was struck by how familiar it felt, how right. 20 years of holding this hand, and it still gave her the same flutter of excitement as it had that first day. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "giving up your solitude for a noisy family?" Brennan pulled her close, his arms coming around her waist. He was older now, his beard shot through with silver, his body bearing the scars and stiffness of hard years. But his eyes were the same, still that stormy gray, still looking at her like she was the most important thing in his world. "Not for a single second," he said. "Sarah, you gave me everything I thought I had lost: purpose, love, family. You took a broken man and made him whole again. How could I ever regret that?" "I love you," Sarah said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "Just as much now as I did when I was that frightened girl on the trail." "I love you too," Brennan said, "more than words can say." They stood there in the clearing, holding each other as the sun set behind the mountains, and Sarah thought about everything that had brought them to this moment, the loss and the fear and the chance meeting that had changed both their lives. The bullet Brennan had pulled from his own arm with barely a flinch, then the way he had held her close afterward, making her feel safe despite the violence they had just survived. She had not known it then, but that moment had been the beginning of everything, the beginning of their love story, their family, their life together. "Come on," Brennan said, taking her hand. "Let us go home." Home. The word filled Sarah with warmth. Not the cabin, though she loved it. Home was wherever Brennan was, wherever their children were. Home was the life they had built together in these mountains, carved out of wilderness and determination and love. They rode back to the cabin as the stars came out, one by one, lighting up the vast Montana sky. When they arrived, they could see lamps glowing in the windows, could hear Thomas and Emma arguing good-naturedly about something, could hear Grace singing softly to herself. "This is everything," Sarah said quietly. "Everything I ever wanted and more." Brennan helped her down from the horse and kissed her, long and slow and sweet. "And we are just getting started," he said. "We've got years ahead of us still, you and I. Years of watching our children grow, of growing old together. I plan to love you for all of them." "You better," Sarah said with a smile, "because I plan to love you right back." They walked into the cabin hand in hand, into the warmth and the light and the noise of their family. Thomas looked up from the book he was reading. Emma stopped mid-argument to wave hello, and Grace abandoned her song to run and hug them both. This was their life, messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah and Brennan sat by the fireplace, just the two of them. Brennan had his arm around her shoulders, and Sarah leaned into him, perfectly content. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For saving me, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Sarah." Brennan turned to look at her, his expression serious. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, maybe more. Before you I was just existing, just surviving. You taught me how to live again. Then we saved each other." "Yes," Brennan agreed. "We did." Sarah thought about that day on the trail, about watching Brennan pull that bullet from his arm with such unflinching courage, about the way he had reached for her afterward, holding her close like nothing had even happened. Like taking a bullet was just part of the job, but keeping her safe was what really mattered. She had fallen in love with him in that moment, she realized now. Fallen in love with his strength, his courage, his absolute refusal to let pain or fear stop him from protecting her. And every day since then, she had fallen a little bit deeper. "What are you thinking about?" Brennan asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That day," Sarah said, "when you pulled the bullet from your arm, do you remember?" "How could I forget? It hurt like hell." He smiled. "But then you were there, helping me, not running away. And I thought, this woman is something special. I was terrified. You did not show it. You were steady, strong. I knew right then that you were going to change my life. Did you know you were going to fall in love with me? Brennan considered this. Not right away. But by the time we reached Silver Creek, yes, I knew. I think I knew from the moment you stood up to me about your petticoat, insisted on helping me, even though you had no idea what you were doing. You had this fire in you, this determination. I was lost. Sarah laughed. I had no idea what I was doing with anything. I still do not most days. You do better than you think. Look at what we have built, Sarah. Look at our children, our home, our life. You did that. We did that together. Together, Sarah echoed, snuggling closer to him. I like the sound of that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, a wolf howled in the distance, and an owl called from the trees. The sounds of the wilderness, the sounds that had frightened Sarah so much when she first arrived, now comforted her. This was home. This was where she belonged. Brennan, she said after a while. Do you think the children will stay here, in the mountains, or will they leave, go find their own adventures? Brennan was quiet for a moment. I think they will find their own paths, whatever those may be. Thomas loves the mountains as much as I do. I think he will stay. The girls, he trailed off. The girls are different. They might want to see the world, might want more than what we can offer here. And if they do, we will let them go, because that is what parents do. We raise them to be strong and independent, and then we trust them to make their own choices. That's going to be hard. The hardest thing we will ever do, Brennan agreed, but we will do it together, just like everything else. Together, Sarah said again, and sealed it with a kiss. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Thomas did indeed choose to stay in the mountains, building his own cabin a few miles from theirs and starting his own family. Emma married a merchant and moved to Sacramento, where she opened the dress shop that Sarah had once dreamed of. Grace surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, traveling to different mining camps and settlements, bringing education to children who had none. Sarah and Brennan grew older together, their bodies slowing but their love never wavering. Brennan's hair went completely white, and his hands developed arthritis that made some tasks difficult. Sarah's eyesight faded, requiring her to hold her sewing close to see. But they adapted, adjusting their life to accommodate their aging bodies, never complaining, always grateful for another day together. They had grandchildren now, a whole flock of them who visited regularly, filling the cabin with noise and laughter. Sarah loved spoiling them, teaching them to bake and sew and garden. Brennan taught them the ways of the wilderness, just as he had taught their parents, passing down knowledge that stretched back generations. On a crisp autumn morning, Sarah woke to find Brennan standing at the window, looking out at the valley bathed in golden sunrise light. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Everything," Brennan said. "Nothing. Just feeling grateful, I suppose." "For what?" "For this. For you. For the fact that I get to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. For the family we created, the life we built. For that day 30 years ago when I heard gunshots and decided to investigate instead of minding my own business." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," Brennan corrected. "The best was asking you to marry me." "That was a pretty good one," Sarah agreed with a smile. They stood there together, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, painting the mountains in shades of gold and orange. The valley was still beautiful, still wild, still home. Some things never changed. "Brennan," Sarah said after a while. "Yes, love? When our time comes, when we are too old and tired to keep going, I want to go together. I do not want to face a world without you in it." Brennan turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "Sarah, when that time comes, and I pray it is many years from now, I will fight to stay with you until the very last moment, and then, God willing, we will go together, just like you want. But until then, we have got living to do." "Yes," Sarah said, "we do." They spent that day doing all the things they loved, walking through the valley hand in hand, sitting by the stream and watching the fish jump, tending the garden together, making love in the afternoon light, their bodies familiar and beloved. cooking dinner together, moving around the kitchen in the synchronized dance of a couple who had spent decades learning each other's rhythms. As the sun set, they sat on the porch they had built together years ago, watching the stars come out. Sarah thought about that frightened woman on the wagon trail, about the mountain man who had saved her, about the bullet he had pulled from his own arm with such unflinching courage, about the way he had held her afterward, making her feel safe despite everything. That moment had been the foundation of everything. The moment when she had seen his strength, his courage, his absolute determination to protect her at any cost. The moment when she had realized that this man, this wild, uncivilized mountain man, was exactly what she needed. "I would do it all again," Sarah said quietly. "Every moment, every hardship, every joy. I would do it all again just to end up here with you." "So would I," Brennan said, 1,000 times over. They sat in comfortable silence as night fell completely, the valley disappearing into darkness, save for the stars overhead and the lamp glowing in their cabin window. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled and another answered, the eternal song of the wilderness, wild and free and beautiful. Sarah thought about the children she had taught to be brave, to be kind, to be true to themselves. She thought about the grandchildren who would carry forward the legacy she and Brennan had built. She thought about all the lives they had touched, all the love they had shared, all the moments big and small that had woven together to create this beautiful, complicated, perfect life. "No regrets?" Brennan asked, as if reading her mind. "Not a single one," Sarah said. "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner." Sarah smiled and squeezed his hand. "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Everything happened exactly as it needed to." "You were probably right." "I'm definitely right." Brennan laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and pulled her closer. Sarah went willingly, settling against his side like she had done thousands of times before. They fit together perfectly, two puzzle pieces that had found their match. "I love you, Sarah Brennan said, his voice rough with emotion. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that until my last breath." "I love you too, Jacob Brennan," Sarah replied, "my mountain man, my protector, my partner, my everything." They sat there on the porch long into the night, wrapped in each other's arms, wrapped in the life they had built together. The mountains stood watch around them, eternal and unchanging. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance, and in that cabin in that hidden valley, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close and counted their blessings. Their love story had started with violence and blood and courage. It had grown through hardship and determination and unwavering faith in each other. And it would continue through whatever years remained, through whatever challenges came, because they had learned the most important lesson of all, that love was not just a feeling, but a choice. A choice they made every single day, to stand together, to face the world together, to build a life together, to grow old together, always together. And as the moon rose over the mountains, casting silver light across the valley, Sarah and Brennan sat on their porch and dreamed of all the tomorrows still to come, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it, the same way they had faced everything else, hand in hand, heart to heart, together until the very end and beyond. This was their story. The mountain man who pulled a bullet from his own arm, then held her close like nothing had even happened. The woman who had been saved and who had saved him in return. Two broken people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. This was their love, wild and fierce and gentle and true. As enduring as the mountains themselves, as constant as the stars overhead, as deep as the valleys and as high as the peaks. This was their life, hard-won and well-lived, full of joy and sorrow and everything in between. A life that had started with a gunshot and a bullet and a moment of unflinching courage, and had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. This was their happily ever after. Not perfect, not easy, but absolutely, completely, wonderfully real. And that, Sarah thought, as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms under the Montana stars, was all anyone could ever ask for.